Okay, we are recording. All right, so we are back to Mishlei, Monday Night Mishlei, and this is 1029. Okay, Yud Chaf Tes, and this one's a doozy to read and translate. Okay, so usually that means that the ideas are more accessible, but we're gonna have to do some work here. Ma'oz latom derech Hashem umechita lafo le'aven. Who would like to suggest a working translation?
I could try. I might butcher it.
Okay, go ahead.
So, like, I'm recognizing like Russian, but I don't know if it's.
That's the way to go.
So ma'oz lasom. So ma'oz like power, like from power.
Okay.
Lasom. Then I'm thinking like tom, like simplicity, maybe.
Okay.
So like from the strength of simplicity.
Well, latom.
Oh, to simplicity.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just going to type what you write, what you say now, and then we'll modify as we go.
Okay. Derech Hashem, like, is the way to Hashem.
Okay.
Mechate, that one I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that.
The mechita, yeah, it's not a commonly used term. Anyone know what mechita is? I feel like we've had it before in chapter 10, but at some point in the past. So mechita is destruction, okay? And destruction.
Oh, yeah.
Lefole oven.
To the doers of evil.
Okay. Doers of. Let's use a different word just because usually we translate ra as evil. Anyone have a favorite translation of oven? I know Art Scroll does. Art Scroll loves calling it iniquity. Okay. But I like iniquity, injustice, something like that. Okay. So this is what we have so far. Obviously, we have a lot of work to do here. So first thing I want to show you is the Al HaTorah dictionary translation of the term ma'oz. So they say ma'oz is place or means of safety or protection, place of safety, protection. Okay. So, but Sarah's right that it comes from the word strength. Okay. So let's just translate it as powerful protection. That way we get like the denotation and the connotation. Okay. And we'll switch it if we have to. Oh, it says here. Yeah, it says it's a, I don't know what COLLAT, not collateral. I don't know what that is. Idea of strength as if from Azaz. All right, fine. Okay, so that's ma'oz. Now, tome is the difficult one, okay? Tome, so Sarah said simplicity, that's fine. All Torah translates it as completeness, integrity, completeness, fullness, innocence, simplicity, integrity of mind. Okay, Urim V'Tumim, I don't think that's the one that we have here. So I don't remember if we've had the term tome before, but there is actually going to be in a couple of weeks, or not a couple of weeks, in several weeks, when we get into chapter 11:3, begin, like we've been on a series of pasukim about tzaddikim and rashayim. There's going to be a series of pasukim about tome. And on that pasuk, Rabbeinu Yonah gives a definition of tome. And usually I don't like to preempt our questions with like a conceptual definition, but in this case I think it's advisable. Like we've had cases before where we plug in a definition for one of them before just because otherwise the puzzle would be too difficult. So we're going to do that right now. Okay, so we're deviating from our usual procedure here. I'm going to read to you the Rabbeinu Yonah, and then we'll come up with a translation based on the Rabbeinu Yonah, and we'll stick with that even if there are other interpretations. Okay, trust me on this. It's it'd be too easy to just spend the whole time on what tome is. Okay, so Rabbeinu Yonah says, and I'm not even going to read the entire the pasuk he's commenting on because we'll do that when we get to it. So he says like this: Ve'ata, oops, sorry, hold on just a second. Ve'ata avar inyan hatom ve'inyan hayosher. So the pasuk is about two personalities, Tom and a Yosher. Okay, and they're related. So he says, Da ki hatom shlemus midos hanefesh. Okay, how would you translate shlemus midos hanefesh? Shlemus?
Perfection of like
yeah,
animalistic traits, or maybe just like soul traits. I'm not sure what it's.
Yeah, the traits of the soul, right? Traits of the soul. And did you say animalistic because nefesh is associated with like the animalistic part of you?
Yeah, so I was thinking like controlling like instinct.
Yeah, okay, good. So that actually is the way that Rabbeinu Yonah uses nefesh, like the animalistic part. Okay, so it sounds like if we just stop here, it sounds like he's saying that a tome means total perfection. Okay, that's not what he means. Okay, he says like this. Commotion Emar, as it says, Batam Levavi. Okay, so in Tehillim it says, with the tamness of my heart. Okay. V'hinei tira ki habehema asher ein ba mum tikare tmima. So he says, you see that an animal that has no blemish is called a tamima. Okay, tamim yihi laratzon. So it says that about animals. It should be a blemish-free animal for favor. Para aduma tamima, or the para aduma has to be without blemish. Kishlemus habehema beheder hamum mibasara nikres tamima. So the perfection of an animal consists in the absence, of blemishes from its flesh, and that's called tamima. Umum ha'adam roa midos nafsho, and the blemish of man is the badness or bad midos of his soul. Okay, alkein yikari misha ein lo mida maguna tamim. Therefore, we call someone who doesn't have a bad mida tamim. Okay, v'chein amru zal al inyan tzadik tamim. Okay, that's what Chazal say about someone who's a tzadik tamim b'durachav, tzadik b'masav. Okay, I don't know what Gemara there is. I didn't have a chance to look it up, but there's one coming up. Oh, sorry, upirish tamim b'durachav b'midosav. Okay, but he just gives a bunch of examples here. Okay, so what do we get from this? So we get from this that tamim means perfection, but not perfection in the positive sense, perfection in the absence of negative sense, and specifically absence of negative character traits. Okay, so how, if we had to come up with a translation of that, what would you say? Like, do you have any good terms for that? And it's describing a person, by the way. In this case, it's a noun. Okay. That's how most Mefarshim take it. So how do you describe someone who has no bad midos? Not describe. What word would you use?
A tzaddik?
Well, but tzaddik implies. Okay, so again, these are all loaded terms. I didn't mean to ask for what Hebrew terms, but since you mentioned them, I'm going to say a tzaddik. We've been doing tzaddik for a while now. Tzaddik seems to be an actual positive perfection, like an attachment to justice, or I think we saw recently an attachment to God's will. And a chassid is going even beyond that. Okay, or let's say Pirkei Avos is about how to become a chassid. We mentioned before that Mishlei only has, I think, one pasuk that has to do with a chassid, and very few pasukim that have to do with chesed, because chesed is beyond Mishlei and Tehillim. But I was asking in English, like, what English word should we use to describe someone who has no bad midos? Is there a good English word? I'm genuinely asking. Say again?
Could it be something like sinless, like just like the lack of something?
Okay, yeah.
Negative.
So I do feel like I was going to call this the lazy option, but it might be our best option. I think we have to like define it in the negative. Okay, so sinless would be is a good kind of word, but according to Rabbeinu Yonah, it's not emphasizing that he hasn't done sins. It's emphasizing that the person doesn't have bad midos. Okay.
Is it just like a good-natured person?
Okay, so I'm going to jump the gun here, but since it's jumping the gun like 2 months in advance, then I don't mind because hopefully we'll forget it. Rabbi Moskowitz says that, and I think he gets this from Rabbeinu Yonah, so we might actually like literally see this in a couple of months. Rabbi Moskowitz says there's two ways to become, two types of tom, okay, two types of, or tom, if you want to use the Haggadah term, okay? There are people who are just what Rabbi Moskowitz used to call it naturally evenly keeled, which means that they just don't have any extreme traits in one way or another. Like they're not an angry person, they're not a jealous person, they're not a like overly like a attached person. They're just like, I don't know what the modern, like I would use the word chill, but chill is more like a mood. This is more like a like good nature, like Schiffer said, good natured person. So that's one way, is you could be born that way. And when he says born way, it doesn't mean that you come out of the womb that way. It means that nature and nurture, by the time you're like, your personality is formed, you're just naturally like that. Okay. And then he says there's another way to become a tom, which is by working on yourself, by undoing your bad midos. Okay. But I like the term good natured, but I think because good natured only describes one of those personalities, then it would be too limiting. So let's do this. Let's take something like Abigail's approach and say blemish free. Okay, with the asterisk here. Yeah.
Something like balanced.
Okay, balanced is good. Balanced is good. Okay, hold on a second. When I say blemish equals bad character trait. Okay, so blemish. So let's say power protection to a blemish free person. Okay, hold on a second here. And balanced is our other candidate. Okay. Let's say alternatively balanced. Okay, I'm going to put it down here, not because it's secondary, but just because I don't want to clutter the translation right now. Okay, so
I have another suggestion, but
Sure.
it might not be great. You know, like
That's
a
fine.
saint,
what do you
but
say?
it's like really a saint,
A saint.
but
I feel
it's
like that's just
Christian
too loaded of a
connotations.
term.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's-
right. Yeah, I mean, I don't even like translating. Like, I feel like if you're gonna use the word saints to describe like any of the Hebrew terms, I feel like chassid is like the closest one to that. But I feel like it's just you know that's too high. And again, to me, saint implies like virtue, like they have positive qualities, whereas Rabbeinu Yonah is putting the emphasis on lack of the negative. You know.
Wait, what's
Okay.
wrong with
What's wrong with what?
pure?
Pure is good. I think I just don't like pure because number one, that's already a Hebrew word of tahor, you know, and you know me, I don't like using, you know, like when I just said translate oven as not evil. I like having like a 1-to-1 ratio of English terms to like Hebrew terms, especially if we're using these terms a lot. But I also think pure has a connotation, you know, that is like I don't know, it has a very like religious connotation, you know, and that's not. This is more like ethical, you know. If you were talking about maybe a tome in Tehillim, maybe I might be more open to that, but yeah.
What
Part
about a
of my-
neutral person?
Say again, Panina.
A neutral person.
Okay, neutral person is another good one. Okay, balanced or neutral. I might as well put Ryan Moskowitz up here also, or evenly keeled. Which, by the way, I looked it up. Evenly keeled is not a word. But I added it to my dictionary. I think when I looked up in the other dictionary, it wasn't a word. Even keel is a word that you are on an even keel. But Ryan Moskowitz used to say evenly keeled, and he's allowed to make up words, so we're doing that. Yeah. Okay. So obviously, as we learn the pasuk, we're gonna have to refine this. But since we're not even on the question, we haven't even finished the translation yet. Let's just put a cork in it. Is that the phrase? Whatever. We'll keep it like this right now. Okay. Now let's go back to the actual pasuk and just clean it up a bit before we look at the other translations. So Sarah initially said the way to Hashem, but I'm going to take the word to out because you could say it's the way to Hashem, but it could also be the way of Hashem. Okay. And I think in English, it makes more sense to say the way of to or the way of Hashem is or provides powerful protection to a blemish-free person. Okay. And destruction to the doers of iniquity. Okay, so the second half is easier. All right. So yeah, the way to of Hashem or the way of Hashem is or provides powerful protection to a blemish-free person and destruction to the doers of iniquity. Okay. Okay, so let's just do what we usually do and look at our minimalist translators and then our English, and then we'll raise the question. Sadigon says, Derech Hashem owes lebale hatom. So he just makes the word tome, which is an adjective, into a he says you have to put the people in there. So people who possess this quality of tome. Okay, that's not adding anything new. The Targum Ksuvim says ma'ashna l'tmime orche de elaka the shetia neheve le'ilan de avnin avvasa. Okay, I think that's just the same also. Oh, you know what? I just messed this up. Hold on. I have to save this as a new document. This is analysis notes. Okay. Okay, so that doesn't give us anything new. And then we have Art Scroll says the way of Hashem is a stronghold. Okay, I like the word stronghold, actually. Let's go with stronghold. Actually, you know what? I like the word stronghold because that way we could get rid of provides and just say is a. Okay, is a stronghold. So that has the idea of strength and protection. The way of Hashem is a stronghold to the innocent. Okay, that I don't like innocent in the same way that I don't like sinless, because it puts the emphasis on like they haven't committed misdeeds. But Arun to the workers of iniquity. Okay, I don't know why I guess poel, they want to say poel like an employee, like a worker. Living Knox says the way of God is a fortress to the innocent, yet a ruin for evildoers. Oh, that's another thing. Okay, Mechita can either be destruction or ruin, related, obviously. Alter says a stronghold for the blameless. That's interesting. Okay, I also don't like that so much. Is the Lord's way, but disaster for the workers of crime. Okay, crime is another good translation, I guess. Okay. Okay, so now we have our translation. Now we can ask our questions here, of which there are probably many. Lay them on me. And remember, just for people who are new to this year, I can't see your hand, so just like interrupt or use the hand raise feature. And I also won't read the chat because it's annoying.
I don't know if this is really a question, but when it says the way of Hashem, like that's a very broad thing to say.
Okay. What does Derech, what does way of Hashem mean in this context? Can we just maybe throw out a couple of possibilities just to include in the question here? Like, what do you think when you think of the way of Hashem?
Practicing like Torah and halachot.
Okay, so is it Torah? What else?
Like systems of nature.
Okay, is it systems of nature? Right, that's definitely a way of Hashem. What would be the most simple way to learn it in the context of Mishlei?
Like Midos wise? Like
Okay, is it
any-
Midos? Okay, that's also good. Is it good Midos? Okay, is it Mishlei? Okay, just like, and the reason why I'm saying that is I think we've had a couple of pasukim in chapter 10 earlier where mitzvos in Mishlei could either mean God's mitzvos or it can mean like Shlomo HaMelech's mitzvos to his kid. Like, so same thing with Torah in Mishlei could either mean like the Torah with a capital T, or it can mean like Mishlaic teachings. So too with the way of Hashem. Okay, good.
Can it possibly be hashgacha? Like,
Okay, it could also be hashgacha. Is it says I'm going to put this closer to here. Is it hashgacha? Hashgacha pratis? Okay. Individual providence. Yeah. Okay. All right, good. So that takes care of that. Okay. So good question, Shivra. Next questions. Obviously, we have to ask what is a tome. I'm going to spell it out like that. Okay. In this context, meaning we have our definition, but like, it might be adding a nuance. Yeah, go ahead, Abigail, if that was you.
So I was gonna kind of add to that and say,
Yeah.
how do you become that?
Okay.
Or like, is that something to strive for, or is that just
Okay, that's good. In fact, I think I'm inclined to list that as a separate question. How does one become a tome? Yeah. Okay.
What is protection or like a stronghold to a blemishy person?
Okay. What does it mean by stronghold? By
I guess
stronghold?
I'm asking like a blemish free. I mean, I guess it's based on like what is the tome, but
Yeah.
like, does that mean that like you just stay what you are, or like you become like a better
Okay, so
than
let's
that?
put it, how about we put it like, what benefit does this stronghold provide for the tome? Or are you asking a different question?
No, yeah, that's basically what I'm
Okay.
asking.
Well, I'll even be broader than that. What function? Okay, I mean, I assume it's a beneficial function, but yeah.
also, like, how does that come about? Like, what's like,
Yeah.
like, you understand?
How does that come about? Yeah. Meaning, yeah, what like it just magically like you get like a force field, That would be
This
nice.
might be similar to question too.
Yeah.
But what's the difference between like a tome and like a tzaddik or a chacham or like any of
Okay.
the good characters?
Okay, that's actually good. Okay, so what is a tome in this context? And how does a tome compare to other Mishlaic personalities? And ordinarily, I might shy away from a question like that because usually we like to keep it within the pasuk. But I think because we've literally had, we ask this question every time. How many pasukim have we had that had to do with tzaddik? Like a zillion. And actually, let me show you something here. Hold on. I'm just going to show you a justification for Rivki's question. Not that you need a justification inherently, but a justification for why I'm listing it, even though it's one that I usually wouldn't list. Okay, so let's just do a search here for tzaddik. Okay, so tzaddik. Oh, and here's what I want to show you. Tzaddik. So we have all these tzaddikim psukim, and then here's our pasuk. Okay, so the fact that we are in the middle of like tzaddik forest territory, tzaddikim and Rashayim, to me, really justifies Rivki's question, which is, what is the comparison between a tome and a tzaddik? Okay, so let's just put that here. not other Mishlei personalities, how does a tome compare to a tzaddik? Okay, yeah.
I would say, doesn't the way of Hashem apply to not only a blemish-free person? Like, this is supposed to be for like the masses. You know what I mean? A blemish.
Okay.
Well, I'm also saying, like, doesn't it apply to a tzaddik and a chacham and like all these different types of people?
Right.
Like, why is it
Yeah.
specifically blemish-free in some
Okay, so
texts?
let us ask that as a separate question here also, which is the pasuk saying that the way of Hashem is a strong hold only for the tome? Seems like not. If that being said, why does the pasuk focus on the tome? Okay, that's kind of a cumbersome way to ask the question, but I think that is your question, right? I mean, Derech Hashem is good for everybody, right? You know, so like, why limit it to the tome? Yeah, why limit? Yeah, let's say why limit it to the tome? Or yeah. No, whatever. It's good that we asked it. Okay, good.
I think
So I feel
this
like
is
we-
kind of
Yeah, go ahead.
Abigail, go.
okay. What kind of crime is it talking about? Is it sin?
Yeah. Okay. So let's just put both of the terms in one thing. What are poale aven in this context? Okay. What is their oven, and what does it mean by poel? Okay. I'll put in the translations here. Okay. Doer or worker, and oven is crime or iniquity. Yeah. And here too, I would add, how are these people different from a Russia? And again, I'm asking that primarily because of the context. Yeah. Okay. Who else had a question? Was it Nina?
Yeah, but it was sad.
Okay.
I was I don't know if it's two questions. I mean,
Yeah.
they're two different, but I don't know if one of them was already said.
Sure.
About when we talk about like the way of Hashem, could it be talking about two different things, or is it talking about one Derech Hashem, but that it comes out in two different ways on two different types of people?
Okay, good. So I was hoping someone would bring that up in the translation. Because hold on just a second here. Because if you notice the pasuk, it doesn't, when you first read it, it doesn't seem parallel. It says the Derech of Hashem is a stronghold to the tome and rune to the poale aven. So the only other, like, so it's listing the predicate but not the subject, you know. So it stands to reason, like Avital saying, that it's talking about the Derech of Hashem has these two different effects. Okay, so let's add that question here also, which is let's put it this way: the pasuk implies that the Derech Hashem is a stronghold for the tome, but destruction or ruin for the poale aven. How does that work? How does the Derech Hashem have these two opposite effects? Okay, and I think you can, I don't know if anyone else's Mishlei spidey sense is picking up on this. This sounds like a critical question. Like, that's going to unlock the whole pasuk. Okay, obviously we're going to have to define these terms first, but like the crux of the pasuk is going to be like how, you know, how this has two different effects on these two different groups. Was that one of your two questions, or that was?
Yeah, that was one of them.
Okay, yeah, what's the other one?
The other one, I feel like we ask more commonly, is like it puts two different things, like whatever, like however we're defining the tome, and then also people who are like doers of evil. But like, how does the average person fall out? How would they be affected by this Derech Hashem?
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's tack that on to question number 2. How does someone compare to a tzaddik and to an average person? Okay, because as we have it defined so far, the tome is better than the average person because most people have bad midos, and the tome is like blemish free, and then similarly, we can ask that here. How are these people for the Polei Avin different from the Russia and from the average person? Okay, good.
I have a question I feel like it's not fully formed, but I'll just
Sure.
get out where I'm at. I sort of feel like if we didn't include the way of Hashem and we just read the rest of the pasuk, it would say like a balanced or blemish-free person has some sort of protection and evildoers meet destruction, which seems like a complete statement, from
Right,
the
right,
Mishlei
yeah.
universe.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what is so radically different by adding in it's the way of
Okay,
Hashem?
that's a good question. I'm gonna tack that onto question number 1, which is why does it even have to mention Derech Hashem, considering the fact that the tome will likely get a benefit from his blemish freeness itself. Okay, meaning what is being added by making this about the Derech Hashem. Yeah, and that's just another way of saying like, how does the Derech Hashem have an effect on these two? But I like the way Zach's framing the question because he's putting it in terms of like, like it seems redundant or not redundant. It seems unnecessary. Mishlei is totally fine saying if you have a certain character perfection, then you're gonna get certain benefits. It doesn't always need to put in terms of Derech Hashem. And here it does seem to be a combo, right? Like Zach's question highlights the fact that it's not just being a tome. Apparently, being a tome will get you other benefits, but being a tome combined with Derech Hashem will yield this protection. But being a Polei Avin combined with Derech Hashem, as Avital pointed out, will lead to destruction or ruin.
I have a translation question.
Sure.
So for Derech Hashem, does it matter if we translate it as to or of, or is it essentially the same?
I think at this point, I think let's get rid of the two. And I think grammatically that's also the easier read, even though you could say it's a Derech to Hashem. But I think like if you look at the way it's used in Tanakh, I mean, the first, I don't know if anyone else associated to this, but like the thing I associate to this is Avraham Avinu, is he kept the Derech Hashem, Lazos, Tzedakah Umishpat, that it's the Derech of Hashem, So I'm gonna go with that. If we see in the Mefarshim who say otherwise, then we can change it. Okay. Is that all of our questions? Maybe.
Did we ask? I was tuned out for a bit, but did we ask how is it possible that Derech Hashem could lead to like a negative result?
Let's see if we asked. I know we asked that verbally, but did we include that in the questions here? Oh yeah, in the last one. Yeah. Okay. So I'll add that on to the last one. How does the Derech Hashem have two opposite effects? How does it yield a negative effect if it's the Derech Hashem? Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So are we ready for a thinking minute? Okay, so as we do, let us take a minute to think about this, and then we will hear out the half-baked ideas first, and then the complete ideas. Oops, I just realized I wrote mad character traits. So let's say bad character traits. Okay. So does anyone have a half-baked approach?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so here's what I was thinking. So I was thinking we were asking about like the vagueness of the statement, like the way of Hashem. And I was thinking maybe that was done purposefully based on the audiences, because person who is blemish free is probably going to have the correct, truthful interpretation of what the way of Hashem is, and therefore it will be a stronghold. But let's say you have a person who is like a doer of iniquity, their definition of what the way of Hashem is going to lead them to destruction because it's just wrong.
Okay, that's a promising half-baked approach. Okay, so I think, okay, I'm going to restate what you said, but without the first part, and you tell me if it's still valid or if it's contingent on the first part, okay? Which is that so Sarah's answering question 7, which is the pasuk implies that Derech Hashem is a stronghold for the tome, but destruction and ruin for the Polei Oven. How does that work? How does the Derech Hashem have these two opposite effects? So Sarah's saying basically that apparently, so we know that the Derech Hashem is good. So if you relate to it without blemishes, then it will yield its benefit. And we don't even need to know what the Derech Hashem is, whatever it is, whether you say it's Torah or nature or Shgacha Pratis or Midos, whatever it is, it's presumably going to be good. But the Polei Oven, the doer of iniquity, because of his iniquities or the causes of his iniquities, it's going to cause him to distort the Derech Hashem, and that's going to be what causes it to harm him. Is that accurate?
It's similar. I think, yeah, it's pretty close.
So the part that I omitted, and I'll tell you why, and you can feel free to defend it if you want, is Sarah was saying that's why the pasuk is using a vague term like Derech Hashem, because the Polei Oven is going to have a distorted idea, like the tome is going to fill in the vagueness with truth, and like the Polei Oven is going to fill in the vagueness with like some distorted idea. Is that the way you initially said it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, yeah, basically that's, you phrase it, but like the way of Hashem is one thing, but based on whatever their interpretation is, they can either like, yield positive benefits because they're looking at the right way, or they can just totally distort it and therefore it goes downhill.
Okay, so I want to just quote you a pasuk that will help you, that will help us to develop this approach, and then I'll hear from other people. Hopefully, we can develop this. And this pasuk is quoted by several of the Mefarshim. I only quoted 2 of them here. Okay, so the Radak, who I'm gonna just not reveal too much more. I don't want anyone reading Sadi going yet. Okay, Radak says, Ma'oz latom derech Hashem. Oh, sorry. You know what? I knew there was an ambiguity I was forgetting here. I'm just going to point this out for the sake of comprehensiveness, so no one can say that like we didn't read the pasuk right. Okay, we've been reading it as the way of Hashem is a stronghold to the blemish-free person. There's a way to read it where you say Ma'oz latom derech Hashem. That Hashem is a stronghold to the Tom Derech, to the person who is like blemish-free in his path. Okay, I'm going to actually type that out in case we end up making use of it. Okay, let's say translation 1.
I feel like that actually makes so much more sense.
Okay, good. So, all right, so maybe this will help us right now. Okay, hold on just a second here. The other way to say it is translation 2. Okay, Hashem. And here I think you have to say is or provides, okay? Provides a stronghold to the Tom Derech, the person with a blemish-free path, okay? But Hashem dishes out destruction to the doers of iniquity. Okay, yeah. So that would be a second interpretation. Okay, so I'll say what I wanted to say first, and we could develop that. So he says, so he does not take it that way. He says, Ma'oz la'anshe tom. So it's a stronghold for the people who are blemish free. Okay, but this is the part I want to get to. Kain hu shever lepole aven. So too, the Derech Hashem is a breaking to the pole aven. Al derech, here's the pasuk. V'tzadikim yelhubam uposhi mikashlubam. Okay, and actually, I want to show you this pasuk inside. Hosea 14:10. Give me a second. Let's go to Al HaTorah. Al HaTorah. Okay. Hosea 14:10. Oh, and if someone wants to remind me in the after party, I have a story to tell about this pasuk that I will not want to record. Okay. Mi chacham v'yavin ele navon v'yeda'im. So who is the wise person who understands these things? Who is the understanding person who knows them? Ki yesharim darche Hashem v'tzadikim yelchubam uposhim yikashlubam. Okay, so let me just highlight that here. Hold on just a second. For upright are the paths of Hashem, or the ways of Hashem. Tzadikim walk in them, and poshim, rebels or sinners, stumble in them. Okay, so it is describing a similar way to the way Sarah wants to read the pasuk, which is that because they are poshim, or in our case, because they are what do we call them, poleaven, then they stumble in the Derech Hashem. Okay.
Wait,
anyone else want to? Yeah, go ahead.
It's like a question / comment on what we just said. Sure, I'm just a little bit bothered by the fact that like with the pasuk that you just showed us, the tzaddikim, okay, that's somebody who's positive, it makes sense. But here, the best we could give it is something that's not negative instead of like positive. So I just don't understand how that fits.
So I'm gonna suggest. Actually, anyone have an answer to that? That Avital is basically pointing out. Hosea makes sense. Tzaddikim, are going to get the full benefit of the Derech Hashem, but this is not a positive quality. This is just they don't have these negative qualities. Anyone want to answer just that question? Yeah.
I have an idea. I was thinking that this tum level is kind of the lowest. It's almost like Benoni. It's not bad. So it's it encompasses all the positive that can come from that.
Okay, good. So I that's actually how I want to learn also. And the only reason I'm revealing this now in terms of my own way of learning it is because I think you can read this for many different ideas in the pasuk, okay, which is like this. We have seen a bunch of psukim. Okay, I'm not saying the main idea. I'm just saying this one answer to that question. We've seen a bunch of psukim about how great it is to be a tzaddik, okay, and the tzaddik gets this benefit and that benefit. What our pasuk is doing is it's saying that even if you're not a tzaddik, even if you're only a tom, you will still get this benefit of a stronghold by following the Derech Hashem. And I think you can say it for the second half also, which is that even if you're not a full-blown Rasha, you'll still get destroyed by the Derech Hashem, because if you're a Polei Avin. And I'm not defining Polei Avin yet, So Avital, I think that answers directly your question, saying that this is Avigal said, this is the low bar, And I don't mean low bar in a negative sense. I mean the Derech Hashem is so great that you don't need to be a tzaddik in order for it to have this beneficial effect. It will even protect a tome.
Got it. Yeah, got it. That makes sense.
Yeah, and that is an answer for the number 5. By the way, this year, what I want to try to do, I always forget to do this. I want to highlight the questions that we've answered with each of the approaches, so that we can keep track of which ones we didn't answer.
What's coming to mind now as we're talking is, I'm curious, is this kind of protection and destruction, would we consider this natural effect or more of hashgacha?
Yeah, so that's going to be a question, I feel that it's going to largely depend on how you learn Mishlei. We tend to learn Mishlei in terms of decision making for everybody, that we're going to default to hashgacha klalos, to natural, but there definitely are mefarshim who learn this, who would learn Mishlei to be talking about hashgacha pratis also. I would say specifically here though, if we're correct that a tome is not on the level of a tzaddik, I'd be way more inclined to say that this is natural.
So I was actually thinking the opposite, because because I would normally be inclined to just look at it as a natural phenomenon, but because he's saying, like, because he's specifically saying Hashem or the way of Hashem is providing his protection, meaning if it's just natural, then you could just say, like, that person gets protection and this person gets destruction. But by adding in Hashem, and even more so that it's a Tom who's like not at a level of a tzaddik, it would be something that we might not know.
Okay, so I would be more open to your idea if we went with a second interpretation. But I think the fact that I think actually what you're saying supports my interpretation for the first half, which is that it's not saying Hashem protects the tome, it's saying the Derech Hashem protects the tome. So like, let's say, for example, you're talking about mitzvos, it's saying that the mitzvos are going to protect the tome. Whereas let's say you are on a level of a tzaddik, so then Hashem himself is protecting the tome, or if you're going to say that the Derech Hashem is like the teachings of Mishlei, the teachings of Mishlei protect the tome, not Hashem himself. I'm not answering your question about why it says Hashem, but I think if you take the subject as Derech Hashem, then it fits in more with natural.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
For the two translations, is the only nuance between the first and second one just that the second one is like more directly involving Hashem, whereas the first one is more like indirect?
So there are two differences between the translations. Translation one is saying that the way of Hashem is the subject, and the way of Hashem protects and the way of Hashem destroys. And the second one saying Hashem protects and Hashem destroys. The other difference is that the second one complicates the person we're talking about. According to the first one, we're talking about a tome. According to the second, we're talking about a tome derech. And it's more complicated because tome is already a complicated term, as we've seen. So what is a tome derech? Does it mean like is that like less than a tome? Like he himself is not a tome, but like his derech is a tome? Or is it a higher level of perfection of a tome? Like there's a regular tome and then there's someone whose whole derech is tome, And then it also makes it complicated because the second half doesn't say derech, This is why like I'm not as keen on the second translation. I won't exit through. That's a little rude. I'll just make it gray so that we're not talking about it. I also don't know whether Mishlei's. I didn't look at the timing at the trop to see if there's any clues from that. Just 1 second here. I mean, I know no one knows how to really lay in Mishlei except for some like Yemenites and Sephardim, but Ma'oz Latom. Yeah. See. Okay. I don't know if this is going to convince anyone, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. Like if you were laying this in the Torah, all right? Wait, let me just zoom in. If you were laying this in the Torah, I think it'd be clear. Ma'oz latom derech Hashem. It's not latom derech Hashem, So I think, but I do recall last time I looked at the Mefarshim on this pasuk, I do think someone did say it's a tom derech. I just don't remember who it is. Okay, so can we let's try to yeah. Someone says something?
I was thinking that because a tome is evenly like balanced, so that kind of takes away a lot of like bad things that happen interpersonally and like personally.
Okay, good.
So, like different types of ra.
Yeah.
But when that also applies with Derech Hashem, which you might not have thought. So like when things occur, they're also more likely to like kind of go with it. While someone who is not at that level kind of has a harder time.
Okay, so I just missed one thing. So are you taking a stance on what we mean by Derech Hashem in this context?
Yeah, I'd say it's just the way of Hashem, like the way of the world and the way God works.
Okay, so let me, we're not, by the way, are you, just I'll make sure we're on the same page here. You are building off of what Sarah's saying, right? Or are you taking a completely different approach, or neither?
Not sure. I think it could go with what Sarah was saying.
Okay, so, I'm trying to think which direction to take it here. Sarah, were you taking a stance on what the Derech Hashem is? I know you were saying that the pasuk is being vague, but are you taking a stance?
No, not necessarily. I was saying like I think it's one thing, but I don't like I wasn't taking a specific stance.
Okay. Because I'm tempted. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought Sarah was implying Derech Hashem would be like the way, the true path of the Torah. like that.
Well, yeah, that's true. Like it's truth. It's positivity. It's like Hashem's way. But
Yeah.
But I even go as far to say that I don't think it necessarily would be the Torah, because if it was used by Avram didn't have the Torah.
Right. But for us, Derech Hashem is the Torah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's exclusively the Torah, but like it, Mishlei was written for Jews, so it's reasonable to assume he could have meant Torah. Yeah. Sorry, Naomi, what were you saying?
I mean, I had a different thought. Maybe can we say maybe Derech Hashem means like a person, like the religious emotion. It's not necessarily that they're following any, that they're trying. I mean, I guess they're trying to become righteous.
Yeah.
So a person is. That's what. And this is, I think, Rabbi Moskowitz. This is based on something Rabbi Moskowitz said. That he said like the religious emotion can be very, only has like a limited use. I mean, if you have to use it in the correct way or not, it's not necessarily going to be a positive or negative.
Okay, so
that's a different approach.
Yeah, that is a different approach. If you're going to take that approach, you'd really have to explain how it does yield this benefit, given the fact that it like I feel like we've seen many in last week's parsha. I mean, according to the Rambam at least, Enosh, the generation of Enosh, they were following a religious emotion with all these good intentions, and like it ended up with a avodah zarah, and it sounds like they were, that they were at least. I mean, I don't know if they were tome, but like, yeah. I just want to let's set that approach aside, and we'll work on it if we have time. I think the approaches we were taking before are close enough that let's try refining both of the approaches with either Derech Hashem as. Let's divide into two categories here, okay? Either Derech Hashem is something that you are following, whether it be Torah and mitzvos or Chesed, Tzedakah, Mishpat, or teaching of Mishlei. Okay, that's like we'll lump all of that. We'll call that Sarah's approach, okay? Because Sarah's saying it's it could be either of these things. And then Penina's approach is Derech Hashem is something Hashem is doing, okay, in the world, okay? And like for example, I want to show you Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbinu Yonah says, hold on. Yeah, Rabbeinu Yonah here says like this, and I'm going to read this, even though we don't have to commit to his idea, but I just want to show you how he's reading the pasuk. Ma'oz latom derech Hashem, midos Hashem yis'ale ma'oz latom. So God's midos, and remember, God doesn't have character traits. When we say God's midos, we mean his actions, right? Like the best example of this, or maybe this is just the first example I ever heard of, is in Pirkei Avos in chapter 5, it has a bunch of things like there are 4 midos among Talmidim. There are 4 midos among those who go to the Beis Midrash. There are 4 midos are modes of behavior, okay? Because God is one, he doesn't have character traits. So midos Hashem yis'ale ma'oz latom. So God's actions or patterns of action are a fortress or a stronghold to the tom. Ki'im kashal koach hatam Hashem uzo uma'uzo. Because if his power becomes weakened, Hashem will be his strength and his fortress. Okay, don't know what he means there. Okay, but that's not what I'm quoting it. All right, keep on going. And destruction of the doers of iniquity. Gam be'es shalvasam ugvuras kocham. Even at the time of their tranquility and the overpowering of their might, meaning these poleavin, these doers of iniquity, midos Hashem yisala lahem lemechita l'shaber es gaonuzam. The actions of Hashem will be for them a cause of destruction and a breaking of their haughtiness, their greatness, and their strength, ulhashpil ga'avasam, and to lower their hubris. Okay, and then this is the reason I'm quoting it. Okay, Derech Hashem. I think this fits in exactly with what Pnina was saying. Kinishner, as it says, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hodi'ena es derachecha. Teach me now your ways. Bidrachecha chayeni. Sustain me in accordance with your ways. Kain gavhu drachai midarchechem. My ways, Hashem speaking, my ways are higher than your ways. Okay, so that's how Pnina is learning it. That it's talking about God's conduct, so to speak. Whereas Sarah's learning it as the human conduct which is in line with God's will. So again, we don't have to commit to this whole Rabbeinu Yonah business about when the Tom becomes weak, then God strengthens him, and when the doers of iniquity become mighty, then God breaks them. I'm not criticizing that, but I'm saying we don't have to commit to that when we're refining the idea. But can we like bring home these two ideas now, either one, and maybe they'll lead us to the same place?
One thing I'm tempted to do that I feel like could work with either or both of these ideas is to flip the focus from how the person is interacting with the world, and like in the Mishlei terms I've heard you use is like how a person interacts with the system, and say that he's shifting the focus here to saying this is how the system interacts with people.
Okay, so let's play that out. Okay, and I think that works. Yeah, I do think that works with both of them. Okay, so what do you want to do? Do you want to take mitzvos first, or the way of the world? Someone say something arbitrary.
I mean, we can start with natural because it's
okay. Let's start with natural, right? So we're saying that if you are a tome, which means you don't have these bad midos, so then when stuff happens to you, when God does stuff to you, right? Meaning not to you, but like when God acts, it will be a source of strength, or it can be a source of strength. Okay. But if you are a pole oven, if you are a criminal, I was going to say crime doer. I was like, oh, we have a word for that, criminal. Then when God acts, then that will be something that destroys you. So can we like understand what that means? Put it into terms that like are, that makes sense.
I'm not sure. No, you can go.
Okay, sure. I think that like if we're keeping our focus on the system, then rather than saying how we would normally approach it initially, like that your actions have certain benefits, that the systems of the world have benefits for certain types of people. So if you look at the way societies structure themselves, the way that human beings create justice systems or any form of government or whatever it is, however people are gonna establish a society will create some kind of protection or benefit for people who are fitting the Tom description, and will be some kind of destructive force for the criminals. And one example of how this is a natural phenomenon and not just like happenstance is a great concept of like I forget exactly the eloquent way of saying the saying, but a band of thieves will ultimately collapse, meaning the idea is that if you take a bunch of people who are by their very nature distrustful, then the system they create will like hurt them in the end. So naturally in the world, what comes to fruition are systems that are more and more justice-based, and those systems will have a natural protection for people who are Tom and have a natural destructive force for people who are criminals.
Okay, so I actually think that what you're saying is true of Sarah's way of approaching it, that if it's describing Derech Hashem as like good systems that we implement, then that will create things that provide strength to the tome and destruction to the doers of iniquity. Whereas what I got from Penina and what I got from Rabbeinu Yonah is we're really talking, and which is what I thought you were going in the first place, was when stuff happens to you, like you said, like ordinarily in Mishlei, we're talking about your impact on the world. This pasuk, according to Penina at least, is talking about when Hashem acts upon you. So we're talking like storms, sickness, financial ruin, stuff like that. Like the stuff that happens in the world the tome is gonna be able to derive strength from that, and the Poli Avin are going to be broken by it.
Shneas, can I suggest something?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would seem that the tome is somebody who's come to terms with, or at least strives to accept reality as God has designed it as
Right.
as the way it really is.
Right.
And inevitably, he's gonna have to suffer at times. But when he does, it's an insight. It's an opportunity to see this is the system. It's obviously not bad just because it's bad to the individual
Right.
in a certain framework. And there's a lot of chachma and idea to understand because that's real and it's part of the whole system that God designed. And
Yeah.
it's powerful. It's informative, right? But for the fool or for the Rasha, or the guy who's fighting the system, he's fighting reality. He's going to fail. He's going to fail at every step of the way, whether it's socially, whether it's intersocially, whether it's against reality, his health, his safety. In every area, he's trying to bend reality to what he wants. Then when the inevitable hell happens, whether in the biggest sense or on the smallest senses, ultimately he's just going to it's always going to go against him, but he'll get really destroyed by the big stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I like the general approach about why they're going to both react to the same thing in different ways, because one of them is trying to align himself with a reality that he knows is good. That's the tome. And then the Poleavin are essentially trying to create their own reality, and they don't want to be subject to a greater reality. And therefore, there's always going to be a conflict when something doesn't go their way. The thing I feel like we need to work on a little bit is that if we're going with Rabbeinu Yonah's translation of tome as not having bad midos, it sounds like the tome doesn't necessarily need to have an understanding of God's systems. Like, in other words, the quality that makes this a stronghold for the tome is not what a chacham would have. A chacham would understand that, oh, this is, everything that God does is good, and he would understand how everything fits into the system. Tome, it sounds like you can get this benefit just from not having bad midos. Again, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, I'm sure there's other translations of a tome, and we also we said that this is a good reading based on Avital's question, which is that up until now we've been talking about a tzaddik, and our pasuk is coming. The chiddush of our pasuk is coming to say even a tome is going to get this benefit. So we've seen in all these other pasukim how a tzaddik is going to align himself with God's will in terms of the system. But I want to try to understand, how does just being a person without bad midos allow for this? And then I also want to understand with the Polei Aven, even if you're not a full-blown Rasha who's trying to impose the system on the world, what is it about a Polei Aven that is going to lead to this? And I agree, like, fools can have the type of result that you're talking about, Donnie. But I just want to, Polei Aven, like, to me, puts the emphasis on the action, not on the mentality. So I agree with the general idea. I just want to get like the nuances from our
I think just to flip it a little bit is, sure. I just went too far in terms of the chacham part. It's a stronghold because to a tome, reality doesn't break him because he's accepting of it. At a minimum, he's a tome.
Right.
That's the chap. He's not adverse to it. He's not antithetical to it.
Right. Okay, good. So let me just talk that out a little bit. So let's say you're not a tome. Let's say you have haughtiness or jealousy or anger or cowardice, whatever the bad midos are, So when stuff happens to you that doesn't go your way, then at the very least, you're not going to be able to accept it because it's going to go against one of your midos, or it's going to trigger one of your midos. So you're already going to become involved in this drama with reality that prevents you from accepting it. But if you don't, maybe we should translate tome as drama-free person, but like if you don't have these bad midos, you're just not going to react to it in a blowing it out of proportion way. And I don't know if this is the same thing, you're also not going to take it personally. Like, I feel like these bad midos anyone who has bad midos is going to in some way take reality personally, either in terms of its implications or its causes. Like, why is this happening to me? Or they're going to react to it in let's say you have a person who's very fearful, so he might not take it personally, but he's going to be like, oh, now I am not going to survive. Like, it's going to become, this like blown out of proportion thing in terms of the way you react to it. But a tome is just going to be like, okay, like that's, this is what is happening. Like, I'm not going to resist it. I'm not going to deny that it's happening. And that is going to give him a certain type of strength. The very fact that he's not trying to resist reality.
So are we saying that having good midos automatically equals accepting reality?
He doesn't have good midos. He just
He's
doesn't
not
have bad
bad.
midos.
Yeah, not
right.
bad. Midos.
Yeah, what we're saying is that there is a certain level of acceptance of reality that comes from just not having bad midos.
What does it actually mean? I guess this might be leading you in like more of like a pit, whatever. I don't even know what to say. But for not having bad midos, like, what does that even mean? Like, that's such a vague, and I don't know if he said it to be vague on purpose or like, because that's such a huge spectrum.
Right. So I don't know Rabbeinu Yonah's shita on what it means to have bad midos. When I was explaining it just now, I was kind of defaulting into the Rambam in Hilchos Deos because that's what I spent like the last half of last year talking about. And I basically, like in the Rambam's model, not having bad midos are extremes, and not having bad midos means that you're in the middle and you're not drawn in one way or another. There is such a thing as perfecting your midos, which is going slightly to one extreme, as needed, or the ones that's going to be more in line with God's will. But bad midos are just extremes, and lack of bad midos means that you are, I think we called it, you are a completely fluid person. Like you will do, you'll be fine with whatever the situation demands. Like to me, the easiest example for some reason is the Rambam says you have a spendthrift and you have a miser. Okay, so spendthrift, like just whenever they get money, they spend it. And a miser, like can't bring themselves to spend money. And then the middle midah is frugal. Frugal means you save money when it's rational to save money, and you are totally able to spend money when it makes sense to spend money. You have no resistance either way. Whatever the situation calls for, your emotions can just go along with it. It's complete fluidity. So I don't know if Rabbeinu Yonah means that. That's my understanding of. I'm using Rabbeinu Yonah's translation of tome, but plugging in my understanding based on my understanding of midos.
Can I try to explain it with like a little bit more detail?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
So when I think of tome, I think of someone neutral and balanced, as you said, in the middle. And so because of that, they're able to kind of go with the flow, as you were like describing. But when I think of like poale, it means they're actively doing something, not just that they have like haughtiness. So they're actively doing something that goes against, the way of the world. And so when bad things happen, it's no longer sustainable. And so everything crashes down and it leads to destruction.
Okay, let's explore that a little bit more, because I like the inference you're making, which is tome is a term that describes midos, and it overtly does not describe actions. Pole aven is the opposite, it's describing actions, and the implication is like we could be talking about someone who's a fine person, but they do bad things, like almost reminds I mean, whatever. Like it's okay. I won't go into the Sefer Chinuch thing, but like so how does that work? Like, because the way we've explained it, it sounds like the way you're going to get destroyed by the Derech Hashem. Such a funny statement to say, right? The way that the Derech Hashem is going to destroy you is if you have messed up internal perception, either from your midos or from your knowledge. So how would it be the case that doing acts of crime is going to lead to this destruction? So based on the approach we've been saying.
So I was thinking like on a very basic level, someone who does crime like theft, that's what I immediately think of. Someone who steals, and maybe they're not stealing like big amounts, but they're stealing, and that's because they think, whatever they're stealing has value.
Okay.
So when something happens to them where they lose things that they used to think had value, everything crashes around them because their whole world and the way they perceive the world falls apart.
Okay. So hold on just 1 second here. I'm just trying to, I understand it in that example. And could we just get a couple more examples just so I get a clearer picture? Like let's take pull out, let's say like bullying, right? Like let's say like you pick on people who are like, smaller than you, right? So how is that going to lead? So that's point A. Point C is the way of the world will destroy you, and I'm missing point B. So how does that lead to?
Okay, so if you need to bully someone for your self-worth, right?
Yeah.
It's reliant on other people. So then when other people don't validate your self-worth for whatever reason, then it all falls apart on you.
Okay, so the crux here is that all crimes are going to stem from some flawed value. And that flawed value is the bad midah that the tome lacks. Is that accurate, or is that different?
Rubbish.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just have a quick question? I mean, the poorly oven. I mean, if he's already doing, actions that are, terrible, isn't that already like in his nature? Like, how can he have, good midos? Meaning, like, I mean, he could he could be like a nice guy, but at the end of the day, he's doing things that aren't appropriate, and that's just who he is by his very nature.
But I don't think it necessarily has to be by your very nature. Like again, this example is coming to mind because what do you call it? Because Johnny went on his genocide tour over the over the summer, and like one of the things he noticed with all the genocides that he studied of in Rwanda and Armenia and in our Holocaust, is that you have all the people who committed these acts, not all the people, but the vast majority of people who committed these acts were normal people, like they were just normal people who got swept up in the fervor of the times or whatever, and they did these horrible things. Now that did give rise to bad mitos, but like, it's very possible to be someone who's just doing bad actions, and it doesn't stem from a bad nature or bad mitos. Now it might, again, Sefer Chaim says it's ultimately going to lead to that. Like you could be a tzaddik, and if you do bad actions, you're going to become a rasha. But that's all I meant. That like that I was basically going with like that low bar thing. That just like we say, you don't have to be a tzaddik for the Derech Hashem to be a stronghold for you. Even if you're a tome, it works out. So too, you don't have to be a full-fledged rasha who does have a corrupt nature, for the Derech Hashem to destroy you. Even if you just do bad actions, then this will happen. That's like the approach that is appealing to me.
Rabbeinu.
Yeah.
I wanted to actually finish before the flip side, because I think there was a natural way to. So I think for this half of it, I think it's referring to the reaction a person's going to have to negative occurrences, right?
Okay.
And
good.
the guilt is someone's engaging in he's a poel oven.
Yeah.
Right. So then everything, first of all, they take it personally in the first case, but especially negative things that they say, God has it out to them, and they already feel guilty and paranoid.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That I like. So Pole Oven as a reactive thing. First of all, it fits into the pasuk because we are talking about how they react to the Derech Hashem when stuff happens to them. But like, but the pasuk is emphasizing that like if their reactions are programmed to just, let's say like, Hurricane Sandy happens and like you go out and you loot, or like, COVID happens and you just go out and like buy up all the toilet paper so you can sell it on eBay for like a lot of stuff, ratchet up the prices or whatever, like if the way you're reacting to stuff is in a distorted manner. Okay, see, I'm wondering if this is what Penina was getting at before. That everything that's happening is being filtered through these corrupt values. Sorry, Penina, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say that it's kind of what I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can bolster that a little bit as well,
Sure.
But I feel like it leads to a question.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead. We're in that zone right now.
So I think that like this scenario we're talking about is someone who's engaging in illicit activities. In order to do so, they need to create a framework of the world that's incorrect. Mm-hmm. So the easy philosophy to grab at is might is right. I'm strong enough to do this, so therefore I have the right to do it. Right. And so a person engaging in that in those activities creates this idea of the world that is wrong. So at some point they meet someone stronger than them, and at that point all of a sudden their view of the world is now crumbling, because they say, well, hold on, what do I do now? Because everything I was doing was based on the fact that I was the strongest. Now I'm no longer the strongest. So what do I have no rights? Like, am I like the victim? So anybody engaging in some sort of illicit activity is creating some construct to support that, which is false and will ultimately Like, for example, when you were talking bullying people smaller than them, eventually they'll meet someone who won't take it and who will beat them up even though they're smaller than them. So like all of a sudden that construct of the world that they like projected is, is crumbling and comes to harm them.
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean when you say that this is in line with, or this is developing it, but it also might be a different approach. The construct part is definitely in line with what we're saying. The different approach I sense in the fact that I feel like it's a different take on what we mean when we say the Derech Hashem is destroying the Polei Oven. Like according to the way we were trying to say it is something happens in the world which doesn't go your way, and if you're a tome, you'll be able to react to it in a way where you can get strength and you won't overreact or like misreact. Whereas if you're a Polei Oven, then you will respond to it in a way that's going to bring about your destruction. And I feel like the way that you're saying it, you would have to say that the Derech Hashem means like the way God set up the world is such that you're inevitably going to, since it's a false value system, you're inevitably going to encounter something that undermines it because it's false.
Well, it's really the same thing. It's really the same thing. Meaning those are just two different scenarios, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive, because you could just say that if you develop a false construct and something happens, or when something happens, like God does something in the world, it'll break your false construct.
Right. That's true.
You can also say that that's going to be inevitable, but it's
I mean, that does sound a lot like what Rabbeinu Yonah was saying when he says that Gam be'es shalvasam uguras kocham, even in the time of their tranquility and in the might of their power, midos Hashem yisrael lehem lemichita leshaber es gaon uzam ulahashpil gavasan. Like when they think everything's going smoothly, then that's when God is going to break their haughtiness and their strength and lower them. Like it's just a matter of time. Before the world crumbles.
The issue I have with this, which I feel like I've mentioned already before, is that it just leads me back to that question of why is this dependent on saying the way of Hashem? Like, what couldn't we say, like, can't we just say that as a statement? Like, if we say a truth about the world, like, this is the way God created the world, so that's but so why does he feel the need in this pasuk to bring that in?
I agree that we have not had a good, satisfactory answer to that question. Even though Rabbeinu Yonah pointed out that it is a consistent term. In the interest of time, I actually have to go tonight at 8:30. I just want to read. I know we haven't fully developed this yet. I just want to read 2 more interpretations, just so that maybe we can like quickly hobble something together for Sarah's approach. Which again is not like, I do think it's not like a completely different approach. I think it'll work out here, but I want to read 2 of them that have to do with mitzvos. So Sadia Gaon says this interesting thing, very simple interpretation, but I think it works out. Ki atzadik kasher tomar lo aseh nishma, v'kasher tomar lo chadal nimna. So if you tell the tzaddik, presumably we're talking about the mitzvos, if you tell him to obey the mitzvos, he will listen, and if you tell him to stop doing averos, he will stop. The Rasha does the opposite of what he's commanded. Kamamar Hosea, like Hosea says, that's the same pasuk. Ki yesharim darchei Hashem v'tzadikim yelchubam uposhim mikashlubam. That the ways of Hashem are upright, tzadikim follow them or walk in them, and poshim stumble in them. So that I think is an interesting thing that is similar to what we were saying, which is that it's really similar to what we said for other psukim, but the Polei Oven like take it personally, like you're trying to control them, so they have to do like the opposite of what is being told, and that's going to end up being a destructive thing, because the thing is really good for them. Like if you tell someone like, oh, take this medicine and your disease will be cured, and he says, I'm not going to do what you say, obviously he's going to suffer, and the mitzvos are designed for our benefit. The downside of Sadia Gaon's interpretation is, he just says this is synonymous with a tzaddik and a rasha, and I feel like we've done ideas that are like this before in the same parak. The Malbim, though, does a really good job of being subtle here. So like Malbim does. Ma'oz latom derech Hashem u'mechita l'pol levin. Milas tom hine toar ukmohu lechem chom shu kmo cham v'chein mavli shor al eis. Okay. So that's just a grammatical thing. Klomar, Shederech Hashem wrote to Lomar, Kiyum HaTorah v'Chachma, interesting, by the way. He says it's fulfilling the Torah and Chachma. So he's saying it's like, Jewish stuff like for us, and then even stuff that is pre-mitzvahs like Abraham, or Mishlei. Ma'oz mivsar lahem. It will be a fortress and a strength for them. Umechita lefole aven al shelo yelchu ba v'lo yikaimu mitzvoseha hein ba'olam hazeh uviyud hagmul v'onesh. So since they don't follow it and they don't fulfill the mitzvos, okay, so he's saying it's not that if they do fulfill the mitzvos, then they're doing it in a distorted way. It's that the Derech Hashem for them is a destruction because they're not fulfilling the Derech Hashem. Okay, and then he spells out the possibilities. He says whether in this world and in terms of retribution and punishment, lios tzadik ma'oz min atzaros, that the tzaddik is protected from the tzaros, ulehefko mechita v'shever, and the opposite in terms of destruction and breaking. Hein ba'olam haba lios l'tzadik ma'oz migdal yeshuos v'havek lehevek. You know what? This is not the one I thought. I thought it was the Malvim. Maybe I liked this part of the Malvim of the Torah and the Chachma, but this is not the commentary that I thought.
You're reading the Meiri now. I don't know if that means.
Oh, sorry. That's why. It's the Meiri.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. That would explain why it doesn't sound like the Malvim. Okay. This would be really embarrassing if the Malvim is not what I thought. He says, "Ma'oz l'tom derech Hashem hamachita hu hefech hama'oz shehamaoz sha'oz hu az hanafshi v'chezkas haruach v'hifuchu hamachita hanafshis." Okay. So he wants to say, first of all, strength does not mean physical protection. It means strength of the soul. Okay, which I think fits in with the way that Donnie was interpreting it from before, that the way that the tone reacts to the world, and strengthening of the ruach, of the psyche. V'hifucho mechita hanafshis, and mechita is destruction of the soul. Okay, derech Hashem v'hanhagaso hu ma'oz latom. So God's derech and His governance. So I think this is taking Penina's approach, is a strength to the tome. Ki b'darchei Hashem yiru eich somech noflim umashgiach al nitkaim v'chol orchosav chesed v'emes u'tzedaka v'rachamim v'chanina. Okay, this is like the approach that I rejected from Donnie. That it seems to be saying that how does the tome get sustained? Because he sees how God supports the fallen and has care over the oppressed, and how all of God's ways are chesed and emes and righteousness and rachamim and grace. Acha tom hamisnaheg b'midos ele Yimtza ma'oz bahashkifo kichen yisnahig Hashem banhagas hamatzius. Okay, this is the part I liked. That the tome who conducts himself in these midos will find strength in his outlook, because this is how God governs existence. Vihi mechita lefole aven, and it is a destruction to the doers of iniquity. Ba'asher darchehem lazos aven hu hefech midarche kel umikiyum ha'olam. Their ways are going to be the opposite of the ways of God and the sustenance of the world. So this is like a almost like a one that merges Sarah's approach with Penina's, because he's saying that the Derech Hashem does refer to how God conducts the world, but that translates into ethics for us, which is like how the Rambam says, the mitzvah of halachta b'drachav, the mitzvah to improve your midos means looking at the way that Hashem is described and the way He rules the world, and then aligning yourself with that. And it's basically saying that the tome, it's not that the tome gets stronghold because he reacts to what happens to him. It's that he's studying how God rules the world and wants to align himself with that, and therefore he's going to harmonize himself with the systems of existence, whether that be through the Torah or through or through just like Abraham did, And the Poli Oven are going against the world. I feel like this is stuff that other people said before. But I think this was the best of the types of the approach that Sarah was trying to take that I saw in the Mefarshim. But yeah. Okay, so where does this leave us? Yeah, Rivki?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
The only thing that's still bothering me is that I don't understand why it has to specifically say like people that do crime, because what's the between that and a Russia then? Or like someone who just doesn't understand reality.
Well, according to the Malbim, then this is applying, like, this is gonna, so Russia operates, relates to the whole world in a certain consistently evil way, Poli Oven, I think, would suggest that, like, if in one area you behave, let's say, with cruelty, let's say, like, God is merciful, not cruel. So let's say, like, in most areas, let's say, like, you are a, I don't know, community leader, And when you're dealing with your community, then you act with rachamim. But when it comes to parenting, then you have a certain cruelty with your kid. So in that one particular area, that's where it's going to lead to your destruction, because you're not aligning yourself with the Derech Hashem. Whereas a Russia is going to mess up everything, because that's how he relates to everything.
Rabbi Shneelis?
Yeah.
Can I also add something? I don't know if it's in line with any
Sure.
approach we mentioned or any other approaches, but I'm just gonna say it
Sure,
anyway.
go ahead.
It sounds nice in my head.
Yeah.
Can you say that maybe the Derech Hashem is more of like a certain lifestyle we live, and that the tome he has a certain like he's living a certain lifestyle, and his mindset is such that I have to do with the right things, and if I come across a situation where I'm at odds with if I should do something negative or something positive, that Derech Hashem, that certain lifestyle, will protect him from doing the negative thing, versus the Polei Oven, where he may do certain he may have certain instances in his life where he's a nice guy or whatever, but if he does actions that are hurtful or negative, it can leak into other areas of his life, and ultimately it'll destroy him without him even recognizing it. It's a certain mindset. It's like I think the Rambam mentions this in Tshuva, you should one of one of the 7 things you should do is do Ma'aseh Tovim.
Yeah.
Stay away from Ma'aseh Ram, because the more good things you do, it'll put yourself in the proper mindset for other things, versus doing negative.
Yeah. I think that seems like a fruitful approach. And it might even be an answer to Zach's question, which is, and this might be what Sarah was trying to say earlier, that maybe that's why it uses such a broad term of Derech Hashem, because it does encompass so many things. It encompasses, it's a whole lifestyle and outlook that includes mitzvos and mishlei, and aligning yourself with the systems in nature, all that stuff. Let me just end up, because we did not wrap up and perfectly clarify all these ideas. I had forgotten, I did prepare this at the very beginning of the summer, and I put it in my WhatsApp in notes, and I was I wanted to consult it, but since WhatsApp was out all day, I didn't get a chance. So I just want to read to you my summary, and I don't know how this lines up with what we did, but I'm just going to read it so we have at least one, I thought that this was a put together idea at the time, so you'll tell me, okay? So I titled this is my 4th sentence summary, Derech Hashem as remedy and ruin. The tome is defined by the fact that he is evenly keeled without being pulled this way and that by his emotions. And the doer of iniquity is in conflict, with parts of him drawn to the Derech Hashem and other parts of him drawn to acts of iniquity. Oh, so that's different than what we had. Oh, so that's what I want to say is the difference between the Russia and the Polei Oven, that the Russia is not in line with the Derech Hashem. He's antithetical to it. The Polei Oven is in conflict. He's not a consistent Derech Hashem, but he's on the fence. I must have seen that in a commentary, because I don't think I came up with that on my own. Okay, whether Derech Hashem refers to the life of Torah and Chachma, or to the ideal of the halachta bidrachav, or to reality itself in the sense of hodini nas derachacha. See, I hedged my bets. Our pasuk teaches that even a tome will be strengthened by aligning himself with it. The seeking out of the Derech Hashem will enable him to take what would otherwise be perceived as a harm or an obstacle and reframe it as a means of obtaining the good. In contrast, even the doers of iniquity who attempt to align themselves with the Derech Hashem will not be strengthened in this manner, but will actually be harmed, since their inner conflicts and false values will inevitably cause them to distort the Derech Hashem and suffer the consequences. The chiddush of the pasuk, the new insight in the pasuk, is in identifying the threshold. Even a tome who is not a chacham or a tzaddik will be able to strengthen himself with Derech Hashem, whereas someone who is a doer of iniquity, even though he's not a rasha, will suffer destruction on account of his attachment to unjust behaviors. So that's what I wrote then.
Are you talking about intention, like people doing good actions with slightly different motives?
I think what I was talking about was someone who is caught between two value systems, not just an imperfection in one motive, but you have the person who is, let's say the contemporary example, the frum guy who gives tzedakah, and like, keep Shabbos, but also like cheats on his taxes and like, and like is mean to like the waiter, like drawn between the two value systems. On the one hand, he's committed to mitzvos, but he's not consistently committed to the point where he's where he's always doing them. Again, I don't know where I got this from because this was like in June that I came up with this, I think, or early July.
What's the difference between the Tom and the Tzaddik again?
Yeah, so Rabbeinu Yonah's difference is the clearest. He's saying that a Tom does not have perfected midos, like he hasn't cultivated his good midos in his actions, but he's not drawn to any extreme. That's the simplest definition that I've seen. But again, this is going to be the subject in chapter 11 when we get there, God willing, like, we're going to switch from Tzaddik and Russia to Tom and Yashar at that point. Okay. So again, I think we explored a lot of good ideas. We didn't quite wrap up all of them, but I feel like we got enough that if we think about it on our own, then maybe we could put it together. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then I got to tell you this story because I think it illustrates another point here. Okay, but we're officially ending now. Okay, so